I never thought the same hands that once lifted my little boy high enough to see the 4th of July fireworks would one day tremble on the edge of an empty table, my own 70th birthday table with no son, no grandchildren, not even a birthday message from the family I had sent $800 a week to for 3 straight years. My son Ethan didn't need his fist to break my heart. He only needed to not show up. He only needed to leave me there alone under the soft gold lights of Timberline Grill, listening to the waiter ask if I'd like to keep waiting, while my own child laughed at another party across town, letting his promise collapse onto the floor like a crumpled empty piece of paper. What they didn't know was this behind my frugal habits, behind my tidy old house and simple clothes. I'd been hiding a truth big enough to turn their world upside down when the time was right. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. We post new stories every day. Hit like and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Henry Walker. I'm 70 years old, a retired USPS mail carrier who delivered letters for 36 years. I used to believe that if you worked hard, lived kindly, and never turned your back on family, good would eventually come back around. But my 70th birthday began like a blank page. No color, no laughter, no reminder from anyone in my own family. And the cruelest part, for 3 years I had sent them $800 every single week. 3 years, almost $125,000, enough to rebuild a life from scratch. Yet that night at Timberline Grill, the chair across from me stayed empty. I sat alone at the table by the window, looking out at the warm lights of downtown Denver. My phone screen was black, a mirror reflecting a 70-year-old man who had grown too familiar with silence. Ethan had promised he would come. 3 days earlier, on October 7th, he had said confidently, "Dad, Sunday night, 7 sharp. We'll all be there. I promise." I believed him, not because of the words he said, but because I wanted to believe that blood doesn't lie on a father's 70th birthday. But at 6 o'clock, the chair was still empty. 6:10, 6:20, 6:25. I looked at the families around me. To my left, a little girl in a pink dress blowing out candles. To my right, relatives toasting a grandfather who had just retired. And me, just a menu lying flat in front of me. Nothing waiting, no one coming. At 6:30, I dialed Ethan. 2 rings. Then music, loud music, glasses clinking, someone shouting, "Another round." And then Madison grabbed the phone. Her voice was sharp, cold, cutting straight through my ear. "Your age means nothing to us. He's 70, not dying. He can eat alone." I heard Ethan in the background, but he didn't step out of the party to talk to me. He just said quickly, "Dad, we're busy. Another time, another time." When today was the one day I needed my son. I hung up. No anger, no sadness, no shock. When someone drops you enough times, you stop asking why. You just start seeing the truth. The young waiter smiled and asked, "Sir, would you like a birthday dessert?" I said softly. "You know, son, sometimes a birthday cake only reminds you that you chose the wrong people to love." He didn't reply. I left the restaurant, leaving a few bills for the ice water and leaving behind a road I once imagined would be filled with the laughter of my family. The autumn wind hit the back of my neck, cold enough to wake me sharper than strong coffee. The first warning sign. Afternoon. I brought gifts to their house. Toys for Noah and Sophie. A new scarf for Ethan. A box of cookies I baked myself. And a $200 envelope for the kids, even though I had already sent $800 a week for the entire year. I knocked. No one opened, but I heard music and laughter inside, party laughter, not family warmth. When the door finally cracked open, Madison stood there like a gatekeeper. She looked at my gifts as if I were delivering trouble, not love. "Henry, you should have texted first. We're busy. Busy filming TikToks with her $180 holiday sweater. Busy popping champagne. Busy posing next to a 7-foot Christmas tree. Ethan didn't invite me in, didn't bring the kids out, Didn't ask if I'd eaten. I stood outside in the snow handing him the gifts. I still remember Madison's eyes that saw the $800 a week as an obligation and me as a walking ATM disguised as an old man. When I got home from my birthday dinner, the kitchen light cast a warm glow on the walls. I opened the cabinet under the microwave where I kept the leather notebook that had followed me for 3 long years. A USPS man of 36 years trusts 3 things, dates, numbers, and the truth that cannot be ignored. I opened the notebook. First page, October 2022. First $800 transfer, 800, 800, 800, 800. Over 150 pages. Not one thank you. I flipped to August 2025. Blank. September 2025. Blank. October 2025. Blank. They hadn't sent a single dollar back for 3 months. No messages asking if I received anything. No explanations, because they never intended to send it. I closed my eyes, took a slow breath, then opened them again, clear, steady, colder than any man my age should ever have to be. I picked up my pen and wrote one line, October 12th, 2025. Stop. No underline, no emotion, no promise, just a decision that changed everything. I closed the notebook, set it on the kitchen counter, looked at my reflection in the window glass. A 70-year-old man, but eyes that finally stopped being fooled by the word family. I whispered low, steady like a vow. All right, from now on, not another cent. The Denver night wind swept through the doorway carrying the scent of dry leaves in late autumn. I switched off the kitchen light, walked into my bedroom, and knew that tonight, the night I turned 70, was the night I began taking my life back. I still remember that autumn morning in 2022, the day that quietly redefined my entire relationship with my son. Late October in Denver brings those dry winds that scrape fallen aspen leaves into dark gold piles along the sidewalks. I was sweeping the front porch when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The caller ID, Ethan Walker. He rarely called in the morning. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered. Dad, I got laid off. His voice sounded like someone standing in a fog, a little shaky, a little lost. The same tone he had when he broke his mother's teacup 20-something years ago. Fear has a way of never changing its sound. I leaned my broom against the wooden fence and watched the leaves skitter across the driveway as Ethan explained his company was downsizing. 14 people in his department were cut. Madison was scared. The mortgage was due. The car needed repairs. The kids' school fees were coming up, and they didn't have a real emergency fund. Then he ended with the line people use when they're sliding off a cliff, Dad. We just need help. For a little while. A little while. A door you open with kindness, never realizing you're stepping into a room that will lock behind you. That night I transferred $800. No hesitation, no calculation, no second thoughts. I opened my leather notebook and wrote Oct 2022. Ethan laid off. Start support. $800 week. Kindness begins as a choice, but it becomes an obligation the moment the person you help forgets it was kindness in the first place. During the first few weeks, Madison called with a voice soft as Christmas sugar glaze. Henry, thank you. Really? We don't know how to thank you enough. I felt warm, not because I needed gratitude, but because I believe families weather storms together. But 2 months later, her tone had changed completely. Henry, did you send it today? Where's this week's transfer? We're waiting. The word Henry from her lips no longer sounded like a name, more like an overdue line item on a bill, and I began to understand something. When people think you'll always help, they stop appreciating you the moment the help becomes predictable. One morning in mid-January, I called Ethan to ask how his job hunting was going. 10:30 a.m. No answer. Around noon, I received a bank alert. Ethan withdrew $80 at the Iron Bar, 10:26 a.m. I stared at the timestamp, 10:26, exactly when he said he was on the way to an interview. I sat down at the kitchen table, the cold phone screen glowing in my hand. It wasn't the money. It was the lie, smooth, practiced, unflinching. I didn't call back that night. I simply opened my notebook and wrote 10:26 a.m. Iron bar, no interview, no emotion, just data. And data tells the truth. By late January, I noticed strange transactions on Ethan's joint account, the one Madison also used. Sephora, $168 Nordstrom, $340, Kate Spade, $260, Lululemon, $190. I asked Madison directly when I stopped by to drop off some supplies. She glanced at the receipts and spoke as if explaining something to a child. Henry, these are necessities. A decent woman needs to take care of herself. Necessities. A $260 Kate Spade purse. A $190 gym top. I looked at Ethan. He lowered his head. Not because he knew it was wrong, but because he chose not to see it. His silence hurt more than her lies. Henry begins to disappear from his own life. After my slip and fall in 2019, Dr. Klein told me to get my knee checked regularly. I scheduled my February appointment. Then Madison texted Henry, "We're tight on cash. Can you send this week's early?" I looked at the appointment and moved it. The next week moved it again. The week after, the clinic called 3 times. Eventually I canceled. Why? Because $800 a week had become a weight sitting on my chest, an invisible responsibility I hadn't meant to create. I told Dr. Klein my family was going through a hard time. He looked at me with sad, stern eyes. "Every hardship has a price, Henry." I laughed, a hollow laugh that didn't reach my eyes. I knew the price. I was paying it with my health. Spring 2023. The transaction that froze my entire chest. Denver in early April can be blindingly bright sunlight pouring through the windows, making the kitchen glow. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when the bank statement arrived. I scanned down the list until my eyes stopped. Cold spring break trip, resort fee, $1,980 Cancun, Mexico, 04/14/2023 Cancun. A resort during spring break, the kind of place where even the standard rooms cost nearly $300 a night. I remembered Ethan telling me Dad Madison's sick. "We're staying home all week. We can't go anywhere." I sat down slowly, my hands pressed flat on the table, knuckles turning white. While I ate canned soup to save money, while I canceled my knee appointment, while I sent $800 every single week without fail. My son and Madison were sunbathing beside a turquoise pool, sipping neon cocktails, posting close friends-only stories on Instagram. With my money. The paper trembled slightly in my hand. Not from the wind, from the truth. The truth never arrives with footsteps. It arrives like a knife through trust. That night I didn't call Ethan, didn't confront Madison, didn't ask a single question. I only opened my leather notebook and wrote spring break trip, $1,980. Lies confirmed. I put the pen down, and for the first time in 3 years I let my bank account stay still for a day. Not because I was out of money, but because I had finally seen enough. That day, standing in my kitchen with sunlight spreading across pages filled with 800, 800, 800, 800, I realized kindness had turned into obligation. Obligation had turned into responsibility. Responsibility had turned into duty defined entirely by them. They didn't need rescuing. They needed consequences. I closed the notebook. For the first time in months, I heard my own heartbeat steady, clear, whispering a single truth. It's time. And from that moment on, everything began to change. Not because I wanted revenge, but because they taught me one undeniable lesson. No one has the right to treat my $800 as an obligation, and no one has the right to treat a father's love as endless money. Thanksgiving used to be the warmest day of the year for my family, at least when Laura was still alive. She could turn a small kitchen into an entire world. The smell of butter melting, the hint of cinnamon in the air, the clatter of pots, and her soft laugh when little Ethan dropped an entire bowl of pie filling on the floor. Laura's Thanksgivings were warm in the eyes, in the laughter, in the way she placed her hand on my back when I carried the heavy turkey to the table. But Thanksgiving 2023, I stood alone in that same kitchen. No laughter, no footsteps beside me, no one saying, "Henry, careful, it's hot." No warm hands helping me steady the roasting pan. Just me, and 4 quiet walls. I flipped the wall calendar. It's November 23rd date, circled in red since September. Maybe I was naive. But I truly believed Ethan would come. What kind of family skips Thanksgiving? I pulled out the tablecloth Laura sewed back in 2001. Autumn leaves in orange and red, the hand-stitched border running perfectly along the edges. I set 6 plates, my large white and gold one, Ethan's favorite Navy set, the little owl plate Noah once pointed at, saying, "Grandpa, it's funny." 2 tiny plates Laura used for children. And the last plate, the one I set down like a quiet prayer for a family I hoped still existed. I placed 6 sets of silverware, each spaced exactly as Laura would have done. I knew it was pointless. But some pointless acts keep the heart steady. The turkey weighed nearly 9 pounds. I stuffed it using Laura's old recipe. Garlic butter, sautéed shallots, sage, and rosemary. A touch of orange zest. Fine sea salt. While basting it, I whispered, "Laura, you remember this, don't you?" The oven answered with a soft ting. The mashed potatoes were smooth, no lumps. The green bean casserole creamy but not too rich. I baked 2 pumpkin pies, one for the family and one for Helen if Ethan showed up late. I didn't know that Helen's pie would become the main one. I checked my phone. Nothing. No messages, no calls, no dad. We're on the way. I told myself, they're probably just getting ready. But deep down, I knew. Cracks never appear suddenly. They've always been there, we just avoid looking. I was placing the turkey on the table when my phone buzzed. A single text. "We're at Madison's sister's place. Maybe next time. No, sorry. No happy Thanksgiving. No love you, Dad." Just a smooth, empty sentence, short enough to avoid any feeling. I stood there, oven mitts still on my hands. Steam from the turkey fogged my glasses. I didn't blame the kids. Children only follow the tone set by parents. But it still hurt. Not because they didn't come, but because my son needed less than 3 seconds to toss aside a promise to his father. I looked at the 6 chairs, the 3 white candles Laura left behind burning steadily, the napkins I had folded so neatly. I knew I couldn't sit there alone. Not because I feared loneliness, I've lived with it for nearly 20 years. But eating a family meal in a house that no longer holds a family is like rubbing salt into your own wounds. I carefully packed everything: turkey, the best pieces, mashed potatoes, generous scoops, casserole topped with crispy onions, pie, a perfect slice. I grabbed my coat, my old knit hat, and walked to Helen's. She opened her door after my lightest knock. A pale blue cardigan, silver hair tied back, a wooden spoon in hand, with apple compote still clinging to it. Warm light spilled from behind her like a blanket. "Henry, it's freezing. Come in, come in." I hesitated. "I have some leftover food." One look and she understood. Older women have a kind of intuition men never develop. She opened the door wider. "Leftover or not, it'll feed us just fine. Come on in." Her kitchen was smaller than mine, but warmer. The air filled with apple cinnamon and that soft vanilla scent from the candle she lights every evening. She unpacked the food and gasped at the turkey. "Henry, this looks better than restaurant food." I chuckled. "Laura taught me well." Helen paused for a moment. Then she placed her hand on my shoulder. "Laura would be so proud." Those 4 words hit deeper than I expected. I had to look away for a moment. We ate together. No children shouting, no arguments, no frantic, "Don't touch that." Just 2 people sharing a decent meal, talking about neighbors, the maple tree that turned red earlier than last year, and whose cat just had 3 kittens. I didn't mention Ethan. Helen didn't ask. A gentle, quiet kindness. When I returned home, the house felt colder. The fireplace was dark. The candles had burned down into stiff white puddles. I stood in the doorway, taking off my coat slowly, the slow motion of someone trying to stretch out the last warm moment of the night. Then the phone rang. Caller ID Madison. Of course. People who've done wrong fear silence more than confrontation. I answered. Noise blasted through music, shouting, glasses clinking. Madison spoke in a stretched, syrupy voice. Henry, what are you up to? Have a nice dinner. A laugh burst out behind her before I could reply. Then she said, You know how it is. My sister throws big parties. Honestly, you'd feel awkward here anyway. Heh heh. Awkward. She said the man who'd been sending $800 a week for more than a year, would feel awkward. Then her tone twisted into something smug. You ate alone, right? Aw, that's kind of sad, isn't it? I looked at the 6 empty chairs, the untouched turkey, the extinguished candles. But I didn't say a word. I let silence fill the line. 1 second, 2, 5. Madison began to panic. Henry. Hello. Why aren't you saying anything? I didn't mean anything, just joking. Henry. I stayed silent. And that silence, not anger, not accusations, shook her more than any words could. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. Good night, Madison. And I hung up. I sat down at the wooden table, hand resting on my leather notebook. I wanted to write something about the night, but I didn't. Because I realized something. People can ignore your words, but they can't ignore your silence. My silence forced Madison to hear the echo of her own emptiness. That Thanksgiving night, for the first time, I understood that standing up doesn't always require strength. Sometimes, it simply requires not speaking. I blew out the last candle. The room went dark, but inside me something bright finally lit up I didn't want to endure anymore. There are days you remember for the rest of your life, not because they're beautiful, but because they wake you up. Christmas 2023 was one of those days. Denver on the morning of December 25th lay under a thin sheet of snow, soft enough to make the world look like a white painting. The air smelled of pine and fresh sap from the Christmas trees sold on the street corner. The sky was gray but not heavy, as if the whole city was holding its breath, waiting for the holiday to begin. I woke up at 7, and like every year I prepared Christmas gifts for Ethan's family. Not out of tradition, but because that's what Laura had always done. No matter what was happening in life, she gave the grandchildren their Christmas gifts. I set 4 boxes on the table. A metal fire truck for Noah, a 500-piece puzzle for Sophie, a gray wool scarf for Ethan, and soft leather gloves for Madison. I had 2 envelopes prepared too, each with $200 for the kids. I wanted them to know their grandfather still thought of them. Even after sending $800 a week all year long, I still tried to give them something that felt like Christmas. On each envelope I wrote, "Love, Grandpa." My handwriting trembled not from age, but from the coldness I'd received from them all year. At 4 p.m. I drove to Ethan's house. Light snow hit the windshield like powdered sugar. I turned on the radio. "Have yourself a merry little Christmas." Frank Sinatra's warm voice pulled me back to the 1990s Laura in the kitchen. Ethan running around the Christmas tree, and me still believing family was something unbreakable. I told myself, they were just busy on Thanksgiving. Christmas will be better. That's the lie lonely people tell themselves. When I parked in front of Ethan's house, I heard music blasting from inside. The windows glowed brightly. Shadows moved back and forth, laughter, chatter, clinking glasses. I rang the bell. No answer. I rang again, and a third time. At last the door cracked open, not to Ethan but to Madison. She stood there in a beige sweater, the same $180 sweater she bought with the money I'd sent the week before. She gave a thin smile. "Oh, Henry, you're here. No Merry Christmas. No come in. No warmth a daughter-in-law might offer a 70-year-old father-in-law. I held out the gifts. I brought a few things for you all. And for the kids. Madison glanced at the boxes as if they were cheap trinkets. She didn't take them. She only said, "We're kinda busy." The music behind her grew louder. Someone yelled Madison, "Come on, TikTok time!" She turned her head. "Wait, I'm coming." Then she looked back at me. "We're filming our Christmas video for our channel. Hope you understand." Ethan finally stepped behind her. Hair perfectly styled, a brand new shirt, probably bought with my money too. He said, "Dad, we're in the middle of something. We have guests." I told him I just wanted to drop off the gifts and have dinner with the family. Ethan gave a tight smile. "Tonight's not a good night, Dad. We're having a Christmas party." I looked past them into the house. The dining table was covered with luxury dishes, Wagyu beef, a seafood tower, expensive red wine, a gold-labeled champagne bottle arranged so perfectly it could have been a magazine spread, and all year long I'd been sending $800 weekly so they wouldn't struggle. Yet here I was standing outside in the cold. Noah and Sophie ran out of the living room laughing, little red bows in their hair. They saw me and squealed Grandpa, but Ethan quickly pulled them back. "Inside, kids. Daddy said no running outside." I bent down offering the gifts. They reached for them, but Madison blocked their hands. "Leave it there. Don't bring snow inside." So I placed the gifts on the doorstep, and the 2 envelopes with $200 each. The wind slapped the back of my neck. I'd never felt so small. I whispered, "Merry Christmas, Ethan." He answered, "Yeah. Drive safe, Dad." No invitation, no hug, no gratitude. The door shut in my face. I stood there for a moment, snow settling on my coat. The Christmas lights above me were so bright I had to squint. Inside I heard music, laughter, clinking glasses. Madison shouting, "Let's do another TikTok." Ethan's voice, "Make sure the camera gets the tree." My family was enjoying a luxury Christmas dinner paid for with my money, and I, the man who sent $800 a week, stood outside. No one on earth deserves that, especially not a father. I drove home in silence. No radio, barely any heat, just the sound of tires crushing snow. When I stepped into my kitchen, the clock read 7:40 p.m. On the table was a simple, reheated meal, leftover Thanksgiving chicken and a few cold potatoes. I set the gift bag down. Inside was a small silver necklace, the one I would have given Madison if she had invited me inside. I looked at it under the dim kitchen light. My fingers trembled, not from the cold. I whispered, "Laura, if you saw this, what would you say to me?" The house didn't answer. That night, for the first time in my life, I didn't try to forget. I tried to remember. I took out my leather notebook, turned to the last page, and I wrote Deck 25, 2023, $800, week, luxury Christmas party, not invited, TikTok filming, $180 sweater, gifts left outside. Family. Then I taped in the bank statement from last week, the one where Madison bought a $1 $280 gift bag at Nordstrom with Ethan's card, the card I kept topping up. For the first time in 3 years, I began to gather statements, texts, receipts, call logs, photos, spending notes, and every tiny piece of evidence, not for revenge, but for the truth. And the truth was, this Christmas dinner 2023 was the real blow. Not a punch, but abandonment. It was the night I realized I wasn't family. I was their mobile bank account. And when a father finally sees that, nothing ever goes back to the way it was. Winter 2024 arrived in Denver without warning. The wind sliced through the tall pines, lifting the thin layer of leftover holiday snow and scattering it across the streets. But the cold that year wasn't the kind that sits on your skin. It was the kind that crawls into your bones, slow, deep, impossible to shake. I stepped into the new year with a truth that was hard to swallow. Christmas 2023 was the last time I believed Ethan was just forgetful or careless. After that night, I saw everything differently, sharper, clearer, with no more excuses left to give. And then starting in January 2024, a truth far bigger than I imagined began to reveal itself. It was a gray Denver morning. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed. Email from digital marketing service, account renewal, amount $199. Account holder, Henry Walker, registered address, Ethan's home. I froze. I didn't have any digital marketing service. I hadn't opened a single online account since retiring from USPS. I opened the invoice subscription active for 10 months. Payment method secondary card linked to Henry Walker. Registered SSN XXXX4921, my SSN. I had to lean on the kitchen counter to steady myself. For 3 years, I thought I was just helping my son survive a rough patch. But this wasn't hardship. This was identity abuse. Not accidental, not a misunderstanding, intentional. I called Ethan, not to ask, but to hear how he would lie. He picked up in 5 seconds. Dad, everything okay? I asked plainly. Why is there a digital marketing account under my name? A long silence. Then a forced cough, the kind people make when scrambling to invent a story. Must be a system mistake. I'll check. Check. Just one word, but in that moment it felt like a slap to my own fading patience. I hung up before he could continue. The next day, I took all my documents to see Rachel Torres, the volunteer attorney at church, the only person I trusted after Laura passed. Snowflakes landed on my coat like quiet punctuation marks. The moment I placed the papers on her desk, Rachel's eyebrows tightened. Mr. Henry, what is all this? I told her everything. Every transaction, every message, the weekly $800 transfers. She read through the pages, slowly turning each sheet as if she were reviewing a criminal file, not a family one. After nearly 20 minutes, she finally looked up. Her voice was so firm, I felt the room drop in temperature. Henry, this is not a family issue. This is elder financial exploitation. I sat still, silent. Rachel pulled out additional documents. They didn't just take your money, they used your identity. They created income in your name. If any of this is tied to illegal earnings, then the sentence that squeezed my chest. If the IRS finds out the one responsible is you, not Ethan. I whispered, why? She tapped the paper. Because every document says Henry Walker, not Ethan, not Madison. 36 years in USPS taught me to trust dates, forms, paper trails. And the truth here was undeniable. My own son had positioned me as the fall guy for the IRS. Rachel softened a bit. Henry, you need to start keeping everything. Every message, every call, every statement, even the smallest ones. I nodded, but she wasn't done. She leaned forward. If you don't, you will take the blame. From that day on, I worked every night. Not because I was angry, because it was necessary. I opened my laptop and archived Madison's "Send the $800 by Friday morning." Ethan needs money again. Henry, deposit now. ATM withdrawals during hours. Ethan claimed to be in interviews. Statements from Madison's secret shopping account. Photos of her luxury bags bought with my money. I recorded every phone call with Ethan, legal in Colorado. I organized everything into 3 folders: transactions, messages, and recordings, SSN, and identity misuse. Every file time-stamped, a habit drilled into me by decades of postal work. No emotion, just data. A thick white envelope with a red border, the kind every American dreads. I opened it. My heartbeat stayed slow but deep. Verification request. Review of reported income. They were asking me to explain income from digital marketing. Income I never earned. Income Ethan declared under my SSN. I placed the letter on the kitchen table. I had to steady myself with the back of a chair. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't panicking. I just felt heavy, like standing alone on a porch, watching a storm roll toward you. At 3 p.m. that day, I called Rachel. "It's starting." Rachel replied, "I'll handle it." "But Henry, prepare yourself. This won't be the last warning." Throughout March, Madison texted nearly every day, "Henry, where's this week's 800? Don't make things hard for us. We have plans. Don't ruin them. Our bills are due. You should understand that. Send early. I need to buy content stuff." She even sent a voice message, "Henry, you're old. You should let us handle your finances. Giving us the money is what makes sense." I saved everything, every word, every emoji, every threat disguised as guilt. These would become gold later. Ethan called 3 times a week with different masks. Angry Dad sent the money I needed, begging, "Please, just help for a few more months." Crying, "I'm trying, Dad. Please don't leave me." Threatening. "If the IRS asks you, have to say it was you. Understand, I recorded all of it." Every file was one more step, bringing the truth closer to Ethan's doorstep. He called breathless. "Dad, did you get the IRS letter?" "Don't say anything stupid. I'm begging you." I said, "I'm going to tell the truth." Ethan screamed, "Are you trying to kill me?" I went silent for a moment. I had raised him, supported him, sacrificed for him, endured everything, and now he believed the truth was a weapon that could kill him. I answered softly, "No, Ethan. You're killing yourself with your choices." I hung up. The recording saved automatically. A thicker envelope, the IRS logo larger. Even the mailman's voice sounded heavier. "Good luck, Mr. Walker." I opened it, read every line, stopped in the middle of paragraph 2, notice of potential investigation, identity misuse, and financial exploitation. I inhaled slowly, folded the letter carefully, not in shock. I had known this day was coming. For 3 years I saw the signs, but I didn't want to name them. So the IRS named them for me. I took out my leather notebook and wrote April 2024. Investigation approaching. The storm is no longer far. It's at the door. I set the pen down, looked out the window. The April wind spun dried leaves in small circles across the yard. This house, which had stood strong for 30 years, was now witnessing the biggest turning point of my life. Ethan thought I was old, weak, easy to fool. But he forgot one thing. A USPS man lives by paper trails, and paper trails don't lie. And the moment the IRS sent that second letter, this stopped being a family matter. It became legal, federal, and the truth finally demanded space to stand. I closed my eyes. I knew everything was about to change. Spring 2025 arrived in Denver with a strange kind of silence. Not the silence of nature, but the silence of people who know a storm is coming, but not from which direction. I turned 71 that March, an age when a man should be resting, fishing in Steamboat Springs, drinking morning coffee with the newspaper, living slowly, the way older folks do. But life did not give me that privilege. In mid-March, Dr. Klein asked me to come in for a face-to-face appointment. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and old paper charts. He adjusted his reading glasses, glanced at my latest results, and said, "Henry, your blood pressure is unusually high. Your cortisol is elevated. Your resting heart rate is too fast." I said softly, "I walk every day." He tapped the paper. "Walking doesn't fix stress. Your body is living in a state of constant alert. Something is happening." I opened my mouth, then closed it. How was I supposed to tell him that my own son was using my SSN to evade the IRS, that I'd been sending $800 a week for 3 years, that I'd stood outside his house in the snow on Christmas? All I said was, "I have family problems." Dr. Klein's voice grew firm. "Henry, if you don't change something, you're going to collapse." And when older people collapse, getting back up is hard. Those words followed me home. And that very night, Ethan and Madison's plan began to show its shape. Madison FaceTimed me. She stood in the kitchen I once helped renovate holding a green smoothie, the kind of drink people use to pretend they're healthy. After a few cold pleasantries, she shifted the conversation. "Henry, your health hasn't been good, right?" I paused. "Who told you that?" She shrugged. "Ethan thinks you're tired. You even forgot to send last week's $800. I stayed silent. She continued. "You know, assisted living will be better for all of us. Nursing homes help seniors relax. You won't have to worry. And we won't have to work so hard." The way she emphasized all of us, as if me leaving the home I'd lived in for 30 years, was a gift she was offering. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a plan wrapped in fake concern. I answered evenly, "I still walk. I still cook. I still take care of myself." Madison smiled gently, but her eyes never blinked. "Henry, older people often don't realize when they need help." I looked at her face on the screen. No worry, no affection, just calculation. Early April. Ethan asked me to pick up Noah from school because he was busy with a meeting. He hadn't asked me for anything in 7 months. While I waited in the hallway, his teacher, Ms. Jensen, handed me a sheet of paper. She said gently, "Noah wrote an essay about family in the future. You should read it. He's very honest." Noah's handwriting was childish but clear. And then I read the line that made my knees weaken. "When Grandpa moves to the nursing home, we'll finally get his house key and use his garage for Mommy's business." I stepped back. My house, the one I'd worked 30 years to pay off, every brick I laid, every pine tree I planted. To them it was simply something they'd receive when Grandpa moves out. I asked quietly, "Did Noah say why he wrote this?" Ms. Jensen hesitated, then answered. "He said, 'Mommy says Grandpa's house will be ours soon. I thought you should know.'" I thanked her. The paper shook in my hand like a door rattling in a spring wind. I was mowing the lawn when Linda, my neighbor of 25 years, walked over. She was straightforward, sometimes a bit nosy but kind-hearted. She looked around, then said softly, "Henry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but yesterday Madison was talking with some friends outside." She lowered her voice. I heard her say, "The house will be ours soon. The old man just needs to be convinced." My chest tightened. Linda went on, "They even laughed about how your garage would make the perfect TikTok studio for Madison." A TikTok studio. In the garage where I kept my postal tool set for 20 years. I stood there without a word. Linda placed a hand on my arm. "Henry, be careful. I've seen this happen to other families." I nodded slowly, heavily. Ethan called. No small talk. Straight to the point. "Dad, I think you should seriously consider assisted living. It's not safe for you to live alone." I asked, "Are you worried about my health? Or about the IRS silence?" Then Ethan snapped, "Don't bring that up again. It's almost taken care of." Almost taken care of. Only guilty people use that phrase. Then he said the sentence I will never forget. "Dad, just go to the nursing home. We'll manage your house for you." Manage. A paper-thin word. Behind it stood the truth, their plan to push me out of my own life. I sat in my living room with my leather notebook open. I reviewed everything. Madison demanding money like a bill collector. The hints about nursing homes. Noah's essay. The neighbor's warning. Their plan for my house. My SSN being abused. The second IRS letter looming over me. Then I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. Ethan had view and transfer access since 2022, the year he lost his job. Back then I thought it's good for my son to help manage things. But I had been wrong. I scrolled to authorized users. There it was. Ethan Walker. My hand hovered over the mouse. For a moment I pictured Ethan at age 4, wrapped in Laura's scarf, running around the living room laughing under the glow of Christmas lights. Then another image replaced it, a 36-year-old man willing to send his own father to a nursing home to take his house. I breathed in slowly, but decisively. Remove access. Confirm. A message appeared. Ethan Walker no longer has access to this account. I leaned back. Not happy, not vindictive, not angry, just quiet. Quiet like a lake after the wind stops. I whispered the kind of sentence only someone who has been deeply betrayed can understand. Now, we begin again, with the truth. There are nights you remember for the rest of your life, not because they were beautiful, but because they marked the exact moment something inside you stopped living. My 70th birthday was the night my trust died. But I didn't understand it fully until 1 year later, October 2025. The air in Denver had already turned sharp by then, the kind of cold that sits on your shoulders like a reminder that winter is coming whether you're ready or not. I walked back into Timberline Grill the same way a person returns to the scene of an old wound. The warm yellow lights, the soft hum of dinner conversations, the faint smell of rosemary and roasted meat. Everything was exactly the same. Everything. Except me. I asked for the same table by the window. The one I booked last year for 6 people, because Ethan told me Dad book a big table. We'll all be there. I remember how proud I felt that day. A father turning 70, still loved, still included, still a part of something. Now, 1 year later, I sat down at that same empty table and watched the truth unfold around me. At the table to my left, a gray-haired father had his arm around his adult son, while a little boy in a red sweater stood on a chair laughing for a family photo. They looked like the holidays were already beginning. At the table to my right, a daughter was helping her mother open a birthday gift, adjusting her mother's shawl, tucking a loose strand of white hair behind her ear, while the husband poured wine and smiled softly. I watched them all with a feeling I can only describe as quiet grief. Not jealousy, not bitterness. Just the realization that my family had once looked like that, and now it was gone. Not because life took it, but because my own son threw it away. All those empty chairs at my table in the past 3 years, all those unanswered calls, all those holidays spent behind a closed door in the snow, all those Fridays when $800 left my account and not one thank you ever came back. It all pointed to one truth: I wasn't Dad, I wasn't Grandpa, I wasn't even family. I was a walking wallet with a pulse, nothing more. The young waiter Josh recognized me. He approached gently, the way people do when they sense a quiet ache. "Sir, are you dining alone again?" I nodded. No attempt to cushion it. No shame in it. Just honesty. Josh placed a glass of water down and said softly, "I remember last year. You were waiting for someone." His voice wasn't pitying. It was understanding. The kind of understanding that stings. I sighed. Yes. I waited. But I don't wait anymore. Josh nodded, his eyes turning sad in a way only young people get when they see something they hope never happens to them. Waiting for people who don't want to show up, it wears you out. That sentence went straight through me, because it wasn't just a sentence, it was a diagnosis, a truth I had refused to admit to myself. Outside the large windows, snow began to fall. Slow, quiet flakes that drifted down like pieces of old memories. Laura loved snow. She used to pull me outside onto the porch just to stand under it. Snow makes everything new, she'd say, even the hard things. But I had learned the opposite. Some things should never be made new again. Some things should be allowed to die. When I got home that night, the house felt colder than the air outside. Not physically, emotionally. On the desk sat a pale yellow envelope that had been untouched since 2018. My old will. The one I wrote 10 years after Laura died. The one that named Ethan as the sole beneficiary of everything I had worked for in my entire life. The house I built with my own hands, the pension I earned after 36 years of USPS, the insurance Laura left behind, every savings account, every certificate of deposit, all of it, to him. Because back then I believed that love was enough. That loyalty was inherited. That blood guaranteed gratitude. I believed being a good father would produce a good son. I opened the envelope and slid the will out. The paper was still crisp, the ink still bold. The words, "All assets to Ethan Walker," still bright as the day I wrote them. But as I stared at the signature at the bottom, my signature, I realized something terrifyingly simple. The man who signed this would not survive the man I had become now. That version of Henry Walker, the hopeful, trusting, soft-hearted man, died on Christmas Day 2023 when he stood outside his son's house in the snow holding gifts no one wanted. It took me a year to bury that man. I took a deep breath, a steady, quiet one, and picked up the scissors. They weren't special scissors, just an old pair from my USPS days when I used them to trim loose threads from my uniform. But that night they became something else. I held the will, felt its weight, the weight of 20 years of sacrifice, the weight of empty chairs, the weight of $800 per week, the weight of lies, the weight of a nursing home suggestion, the weight of Noah's school essay about getting my house key, the weight of Madison announcing, "The house will be ours soon." And then I cut. The paper tore with a sharp rip echoing in the quiet room like a rope snapping in half. One piece fell, then another, until the floor around me looked like a snowfall of broken promises. When I finished, I stared at the confetti of my past and realized I felt no pain, no guilt, no fear, no sadness, only freedom. The trust I had placed in Ethan, the trust that once shaped my entire life, finally dissolved. And in its place was something cleaner, colder, and infinitely stronger self-respect. I opened my leather notebook, my real record of the past 3 years, and wrote slowly, clearly. October 2025. Rewrite will. Leave nothing to Ethan. Protect the house. Protect myself. I underlined it. Twice. Then I closed the book, stood up, put on my coat, and stepped outside. Snow was falling again. Soft, quiet, determined. It landed on my shoulders like a blessing. I took a deep breath, the kind of breath you take when you finally stop begging to be loved and start choosing yourself instead. And I said out loud, firm, steady, final. From now on, everything Henry Walker earned stays with Henry Walker. Ethan gets nothing. The words felt like a blade cutting through an old rope, clean, final, irreversible. And in the silence that followed, I understood this was not the end of something. This was the beginning of the biggest confrontation of my life. The morning after I tore up my old will, I didn't start my day the way I had for the last 40 years with coffee and the Denver Post and the quiet routine of an old man. No. I walked straight to my phone and opened my banking app. The screen lit up with the same line I had looked at every Friday morning for almost 3 years, scheduled transfer. Friday, $800. Recipient, Ethan Walker. Every Friday, without fail, without question, without a single missed week. Until today. I slid my finger across the screen and tapped Cancel Weekly Transfer. A confirmation window appeared. Are you sure? I pressed yes. The screen blinked. Recurring transfer canceled. I stared at that sentence for a long moment, not with triumph, not with anger, but with relief. A quiet, steady lightness, as if someone had finally lifted a stone that had been sitting on my chest for 3 long, humiliating years. It was October 17th, 2025. And exactly 3 hours later, hell came knocking on my phone. 6:12 p.m. Madison calls. Her name lit up on the screen like an old wound tearing open. I had no obligation to answer, but I did because every word she said was another piece of evidence. I pressed record. I pressed accept. She didn't bother with hello. The transfer didn't go through. I said yes. That's correct. 2 seconds of silence. Then her voice sharpened, switching tones the way some people switch masks. Henry, the app must be glitching. Go ahead and send it again, I answered calmly. It's not a glitch. I stopped the transfers. Her voice hardened like frozen glass. Excuse me, I stopped. It's done. Madison let out a loud, sharp laugh, the kind people use when they believe the elderly must be confused or dramatic or harmless. Henry, this isn't funny. We have bills. The kids have school. You have to send it. My answer was simple. I don't have to do anything. Her tone turned poisonous. You're making this entire family suffer over something small. You're old. Henry, you don't understand finances anymore. You should let us. I hung up the moment she said you're old. The recording saved automatically. 10 minutes later. Ethan calls. His name on my screen felt like watching a bruise bloom. I answered and hit record. Again. Ethan didn't ease into it. He screamed. What are you doing? It's Friday. Yes, I said, and I stopped sending it. You can't do that. Yes, I can. It's my money. His breathing shifted fast, frantic. Then he switched to the next mask voice, soft, trembling. Dad, please, don't do this. I'm under pressure. Madison is stressed. We just need a few more weeks. I didn't respond. He kept going, voice cracking. I know I messed up. I know I said things I shouldn't. But please, don't abandon me. Still, I said nothing. Silence exposes people more than accusations ever will. And then came the explosion, the third mask. Why are you so selfish? You're old. What do you even need money for? You're ruining my life. My voice stayed level. No, Ethan. I'm just stopping you from ruining mine. There was a pause, one long, trembling second. Then his voice broke. He wasn't crying from heartbreak. He was crying from panic. Dad, please. Please don't. I hung up. Second recording saved. 8:04 p.m. Madison calls again. Her voice was slurred, the sound of whine, anger, and entitlement mixing together. Henry, you're embarrassing us. You know what we told our friends, that you support us. Now you stopped and we look. Poor, I said. One sentence, that sounds like your problem. Madison snarled. Selfish old man. You have a house. We're supposed to have that house. How long are you even planning to live? Let that money be useful for once. I hung up. Third recording saved. 9:17 p.m. Tires screech outside. I was watering my lavender plants when I heard a car slam to a stop in front of my house. The headlights were too bright, too aggressive. Ethan got out first. Madison got out second, her purse slung over her shoulder like she came armed for a confrontation. They stormed up my walkway. No greeting, no attempt at civility. Just pure, undiluted entitlement. Ethan pounded on the door 3 times, loud enough to shake the frame. I opened the door only an inch, keeping the chain lock in place. Madison barked. We need to talk. No, I said. You need to leave. Ethan roared. You don't get to say no. Madison shoved forward, opened the door. This is family business. I held my ground. You stopped acting like family a long time ago. Ethan slammed his palm into the door, but the safety chain held. He shouted, You owe us money. You owe us support. I answered, I owe you nothing. Madison pounded the wood with her fist. Stupid. Old man. The noise was so loud, my neighbor Linda, who had lived across the street for 25 years, ran outside. She yelled, Stop! I'm calling the police! Ethan cursed at her. Linda called anyway. Within 11 minutes, police lights washed over the street, blue and red splashing across my lawn. 2 officers stepped out. One asked, Who lives here? I raised my hand. Madison jumped in front of him. We're family. We have rights. The officer held up his hand. Ma'am, step aside. Ethan pointed at me, shouting, He's keeping our money. He's losing his mind. He needs to be put in assisted living. I stood tall, back straight, voice steady. I am fully competent. This is my home, and they are not welcome here. The officer studied me. My eyes didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. He nodded. Understood. Then he turned to Ethan. Sir, if the homeowner tells you to leave, you leave. Madison shrieked, But he's family. The officer replied, Irrelevant. This is private property. Ethan jabbed a finger at me. You'll regret this. You won't be able to live alone much longer, I answered quietly. The only reason I'm still standing is because I live alone. The officers escorted them back to their SUV. The car peeled away, leaving the smell of hot engine and anger behind. As the officers were leaving, the younger one turned to me. Sir, do you want to file a harassment report? I looked down my quiet street. Leaves skittered across the pavement. The wind was cool and steady. Inside me, something had shifted. The soft parts had hardened. The timid parts had dissolved. The man who tolerated everything was gone. Not yet, I said, but if they come back, I will. The officer nodded. Understood. He pulled out his notepad. Anything you want recorded in the report tonight. I stood in the doorway of the home I'd paid off over 28 years, the home they believed they were entitled to take from me. And I spoke the words I'd been holding in my chest for far too long. Write this. They aren't welcome here. He wrote it down, closed the notebook. I closed my door. The lock clicked into place, a soft, simple sound. But to me it felt like the sound of a man reclaiming his life. After the night Ethan and Madison pounded on my door so violently that the neighbors had to call the police, I thought naively that they would keep their distance for a while. I underestimated them. People who see taking money from the elderly as a right will do anything when that money is cut off. And on October 22nd, 2025, Madison reached for what her generation believes is the ultimate weapon. A crying video on social media. That night I was sitting in my kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of hot tea, when my neighbor Linda called. Henry, you need to see this. She sent a link to Madison's TikTok. I clicked, and there she was, sitting in front of a ring light so bright her skin looked glazed. Mascara smeared down her cheeks in perfect intentional streaks. Her voice shook, but the kind of shaking you rehearse in the mirror. I don't even know where to begin. She sniffled dramatically. My father-in-law, Henry Walker, abandoned us. He's old. He's frail. He needs care. But he kicked us out. Kicked us out of his home. She paused to cry, carefully wiping beneath her eyes without disturbing the mascara streaks. It was a performance. A cheap one, she continued. All we wanted was to help him. We paid his bills, we supported him, but he wasn't grateful. Then came the final line, delivered straight to camera with trembling lips. Please, don't let the elderly feel abandoned. Sometimes we have to protect them even when they don't understand what they're doing. The video reached 8,000 views in 2 hours, and comments flooded in. But not the comments she expected. Not sympathy, not support, not praise. No. The internet began pulling the thread. A top comment. Wait. Isn't this the same Madison who posted a $320 brunch last week? Another, didn't she buy a $1,200 purse? With what money? Another girl, you're at the spa 3 times a week. Which elder are you caring for? And then people started digging. Screenshots appeared. Madison in a luxury spa caption. Self-care days, I deserve the best. A flashy brunch video with mimosas and truffle eggs. A photo showing off her $180 sweater, the exact one I saw her wearing on Christmas. An unboxing video of a $260 Kate Spade bag. One person commented, Where does the money come from? Because neither of y'all are working. Within 12 hours, the algorithm turned her video into a full-blown discussion thread. Not because people felt bad for her, but because they smelled something fake. Really fake. On October 24th, Linda knocked on my door at 8 a.m., holding a printed notice from our HOA. Henry, they're holding an emergency meeting. The document read, Concerns Madison Walker, Social Behavior Harassment and Misrepresentation. Homeowners complained that Madison was using vulnerable elders as a social media prop. That same day, Noah's school sent an email. Parents have reported that Madison W. used the school grounds for emotional live streams, damaging the school's reputation. One parent commented publicly. She told people her father-in-law abused her, but she's posting brunch every weekend. The fire spread quickly. And here's something true about Americans especially. Older Americans, they hate two kinds of people more than anything. Those who exploit the elderly, and those who fake victimhood for attention. Madison checked both boxes. October 26th. Madison tries to explain. She went live on TikTok again, this time with Ethan behind her trying to look serious. Madison began, I'm sorry if anyone misunderstood, but my father-in-law truly needs help. He's unstable. He doesn't know what he's doing. The comments exploded. Unstable. He kicked you out because you demanded $800 a week. Girl, you literally posted a spa day yesterday. Let Henry speak. Bring the old man on. Not these clowns. Madison clenched her jaw. Her voice cracked. You don't understand, I'm the caregiver. I sacrificed. A comment cut through the chat like a blade. Sacrifice you spend $600 a month on salon appointments. Madison broke. This time the tears were real, wild, angry tears. She screamed, You don't know anything! That old man owes me, owes me! The live stream cut abruptly, but it was too late. The internet had already judged her. Madison Walker, fake caregiver, was trending across HOA groups, school parent groups, local Facebook pages, and even Denver community forums. October 27th, consequences arrive. The upscale spa Madison frequented posted this statement. Spa Valora is suspending the membership of client Madison W. We do not condone exploiting older adults for personal gain. One word in their announcement stood out. Exploit. The exact word for what Madison had done to me for 3 long years. That evening, she posted an Instagram story, crying, shaking, blaming everyone but herself. Why is everyone trying to ruin my life? I didn't do anything wrong. 10 minutes later, the story disappeared. But screenshots live forever. October 28th. The collapse. 3 things happened that afternoon. HOA suspended Madison from all community activities for 90 days. The school removed her from all parent committees. Parents publicly stated, she should not be a role model for children. And then the simplest comment of all appeared on the HOA discussion page, We stand with Henry. No dramatics, no hashtags, just quiet support. It received over 700 likes in a single evening. The entire community, people who owed me nothing, people who barely knew me, turned against Madison in a way Ethan never imagined possible. She had tried to destroy me with a crying video, but the video only burned her. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. They destroyed themselves with their own lies, their own greed, their own arrogance. All I did was stay silent, steady, and truthful. That night I wrote in my leather notebook 10/28/2025. The world sees them now. I don't need to say anything else. Henry Walker, the man they once called an easy old man to take advantage of, now understood a simple truth. When the truth finally speaks, liars run out of places to hide. Duiday la banjik. Chapter 10. Full cinematic English version. Được mở rộng plus làm dày cảm xúc. Dung tone YouTube. Family revenge. Elder justice. Drama. Karma tối ưu cho khán giả nữ Mỹ trên 55 tuổi. Giống kẻ chầm sâu nhiều hình ảnh. Nhịp cảm xúc raw, calm, dread, justice, collapse. Rất phù hợp để đọc thành video 12-18 phút. Yemen. Chapter 10. Early November 2025, when the IRS and HR finally struck Extended YouTube Edition. Cinematic emotional slow burn. The last days of October drifted by like a thin veil of fog over Bear Creek Lake, quiet, unmoving, but hiding something heavy behind it. A silence that didn't feel peaceful, but expectant. A silence that sits just before a federal storm. I thought Madison had already fallen as far as anyone could fall. I thought Ethan had reached the bottom of whatever was left of his dignity. But the first week of November proved one thing. Some falls don't have a bottom. Not when the IRS gets involved. Day, November 1st. The letter that changes everything. At 7:10 a.m., I stepped outside to pick up my newspaper. The air was sharp. The cold felt cleaner than usual, like winter was preparing to erase something rotten. Inside my mailbox sat a thick white envelope, stamped with IRS, Department of the Treasury, not a verification request, not a reminder, not a warning. It was the one letter nobody in America ever wants to see. Case opening notice. Identity Theft and Income Misuse Investigation. Case H. Walker. ID 65821B. I stood there on the front step, hand resting on the envelope, feeling the weight of federal law inside it. I opened it, and read lines sharp enough to cut bone. We have received additional evidence of potential identity misuse. A formal investigation has been initiated. The provided documents are being used as primary evidence. I read that line twice. The provided documents. They meant the evidence I'd been quietly gathering for months. Statements, screenshots, recordings, text messages, bank logs. The IRS wasn't involved because I was an elderly man who needed protection. They were involved because my evidence was strong enough to open a federal case. 2 years ago, my hands might have shaken. But on November 1st, 2025, I felt only one thing: balance. Real balance. Finally tilting back toward truth. November 3rd, the HR guillotine falls. Ethan had an interview scheduled with a small IT company that morning. He'd bragged about it online, a pathetic attempt to look stable after Madison's TikTok meltdown. At 8:40 a.m., he emailed HR. I'll be there at 10 a.m. sharp. At 9:15 a.m., HR replied. Only 4 lines long. Cold. Clinical. Final. Mr. Walker, due to recent concerns regarding your financial behavior and public conduct, we are canceling today's interview and withdrawing your application. Ethan didn't know what recent concerns meant, but I did. He was carrying the weight of Madison's fake crying video, Noah's essay circulating among PTA parents, the nighttime incident where police were called, Madison bragging the house will be ours soon. The official IRS case opening bad news travels fast, but nothing travels faster than HR fear. In America, being linked to elder exploitation is a career death sentence. Ethan opened the email and exploded in the family group chat, the same chat they removed me from years ago. Linda screenshotted it to me. What the hell, this is a misunderstanding. I did nothing wrong. What Ethan never understood is this: HR doesn't need proof, just suspicion. And suspicion is enough to shut every door. The PTO meeting, Madison's last door, closes. The next afternoon, I received a message from Noah's teacher. Mrs. Jensen, Mr. Walker, the PTO is meeting today. Madison's name came up. This is serious. I went to the school. Not inside, just outside the meeting room where the door was cracked open enough for sound to slip through. A mother spoke first. A woman who uses an elderly man for money and live streams fake tears should not represent the parents of this school. Another parent added, She made her son write an essay about getting grandpa's house. This is not someone we want as a role model. The principal cleared her throat. We must maintain ethical standards. Madison Walker will be removed from all parent roles effective immediately. The vote wasn't even discussed. It was unanimous. Madison wasn't afraid of losing money. She was terrified of losing reputation. That night she posted a pure, white Instagram story with the words, "Everyone is ruining my life." Nobody responded. November 6th. Madison's final meltdown. Around noon, I was sweeping leaves off the driveway when a white Lexus screeched to a stop in front of my house. Tires burning rubber, engine choking. Madison stepped out, her eyes red. Mascara smeared, hair undone, hands trembling with rage. She threw a piece of paper onto my lawn. It flipped over in the wind, letter of termination, Valora Spa. The reason for termination: unethical behavior, public misrepresentation, damage to client trust. Madison screamed, "You ruined my life! IRS, HOA, PTO, all of it because of you." I looked at her. Calm, steady. "You did all of it yourself." She slammed her hand against her car door. "You selfish old man. Do you want me to die?" "Poor," I answered softly. "I simply stopped paying for you to live rich." She froze for 3 seconds, the truth landing like a hammer. Then she jumped back into her Lexus, spinning her tires so hard the smell of burnt rubber filled my yard. November 7th. The IRS goes for Ethan directly. The morning after Madison was fired, Ethan received a final email from the IRS. "We request clarification of business income filed under SSN number 4921 for the period Jan 2023, Sep 2024. He understood instantly. The IRS had followed the money, followed the login, followed the IP address, followed the purchases. A case wasn't coming. It was here. At 10:40 a.m., Ethan called me. The longest call we'd had in years. I answered. I pressed record. His breathing was fast, panicked. "Dad, they found out. They know I used your name." I stayed silent. He continued. "I lost the interview. I have no job. Madison got fired. Everything is falling apart. Dad, please, don't let IRS take everything from me." Then he started crying. Not out of guilt, out of fear, out of losing the last income source he had. He said the sentence he'd been avoiding for 3 years, "Dad, if you don't send me the $800, I'm done. I'm finished." I looked at the clock. The second hand moved steadily, without sympathy, without mercy. I said, "That's your problem, not mine anymore." Ethan choked. "Dad, please, you're my family." I responded with the sentence I used to fear, but now felt like the truest thing I'd ever spoken. "You lost your family when you started treating your family like a wallet." I hung up. No anger, no shaking, just reality. Ethan had lost my money, his job, community support, Madison's spa access, HR opportunities, his reputation, any illusion of innocence. He had nothing left except the truth. And truth is a brutal adversary. It doesn't need help. It destroys on its own. That evening I opened my leather notebook and wrote, Novate 2025. The collapse is no longer coming. It has arrived. I set the pen down and felt the first quiet strength of a man who stopped being afraid. Because the biggest storm was only beginning. There are autumn afternoons in Denver that make a person believe life has rules. Leaves must fall. Winds must turn colder. Days must shorten. And people eventually must face the truth about those they once loved. November 10th, 2025 was one of those afternoons. The sky was a dull sheet of pewter. Clouds hung so heavy they swallowed the top of Pikes Peak. I stood on my front porch holding a warm cup of Earl Grey, watching the old pine trees tremble in the wind. Silence. A kind of silence only older people who live alone recognize, a silence that whispers, "Someone is coming." Not a feeling, a certainty. The instinct of a man who spent 32 years as a USPS carrier, a man who could smell a storm before anyone else. And then the sound came. Tires screeching, rubber grinding over fallen leaves, a harsh dragging noise slicing across the quiet of my street. I set my cup on the railing, not hurried, not shaken, just steady. A white SUV skidded to a stop in my driveway, its front tire cutting into my lawn. Ethan jumped out first, face-flushed chest rising fast. Madison climbed out the back heels, striking the pavement with angry metallic clicks that echoed down the block. I didn't move from my doorway. Not forward, not back. Just stood there like an old tree that had survived too many winters to fear this one. Ethan shouted, "First, Dad, open the door. We need to talk now." I tilted my head slightly, watching him through the frosted glass. I didn't answer. Madison slammed her fist against the door hard enough to rattle the frame. "You don't get to cut the money, you're required to support us." I looked at them. These two people I once held as children, whose scraped knees I bandaged, whose lunches I packed, whose homework I helped with, whose futures I worked overtime to pay for. And now they stood on my porch, pounding on my door like debt collectors. The father in me felt a faint ache. But the man who had survived 3 years of exploitation stood firm. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just 8 inches. No more. Never again more. Ethan lunged forward, hand on the door like he wanted to push through. "Dad, the IRS is calling me. They say your name is tied to that digital marketing account. I can't pay anything. You have to start sending the $800 again. You have to." That word "have to" made something cold settle in my stomach. Years ago, Ethan used to say, "Please." Then it became, "Dad, could you help?" Then, "Dad, you need to." Then, "Dad, you owe us." And now you have to. The final stage of entitlement. I answered, "I don't have to do anything." Ethan slammed his palm against the door. "You are betraying me," I asked quietly. How he opened his mouth but nothing came out. Because he knew. Deep down even he knew. For 3 years the only betrayal happening was his. Madison shoved Ethan aside and stepped in front of him, hands on her hips. "You ruined this family. You cost me my job. You ruined Ethan's interview. You made the HOA and the PTO turn on us." I nodded once, calmly. "Yes." She let out a sharp laugh, part rage, part disbelief. "Yes, you admit that I said I admit this. I'm done letting you treat my money like your entitlement." For one split second, Madison froze, then exploded. "You selfish old man. You're useless. You're going to die soon. That money should be ours." And right there in that one sentence, everything became crystal clear. She wasn't here for reconciliation. She wasn't here for honesty. She was here for fear, debt, and greed. I turned, walked inside, and returned with the folder I had prepared on November 5th, the new will and the legal documents, transferring everything to the Laura Thompson Scholarship Fund. I held the folder through the small opening in the door. Ethan snatched it and opened it. He read only the first line before the color drained from his face. "All properties, savings, and investments shall be transferred to the Laura Thompson Scholarship Fund." He stepped back like the paper had burned him. "Dad, this has to be a joke." I looked at him without blinking. "It's not." Madison ripped the papers from his hands, skimmed them, then screamed, "No, you can't do this." "This is family money," I answered. "It's not your family's, it's mine." Madison growled through clenched teeth. "You'll die soon. And we'll have nothing." I shrugged. "That was your choice." Ethan clutched the papers, voice breaking. "You can't do this. I'm your only son." I stepped forward, half a step close enough for him to hear every syllable. My voice stayed steady, cold, clear. "You said my age didn't matter." I paused. "Fine." Then I spoke the line I knew would slice straight into him, not to hurt him, but to finally show him the truth. "My money doesn't matter to you either." For a full second, even the wind seemed to stop. No leaves moved, no cars passed, no sound existed. Ethan stared at me, not angry now, but terrified, because he understood what he'd lost. Madison's face turned pale. Then she erupted. "You will regret this. The whole neighborhood will hate you," I replied. "They already know who you are." Then I calmly pulled out my phone, dialed 911. Ethan panicked. "What are you doing?" I answered. What I should have done years ago. 9 minutes later, a police cruiser turned onto my street. Red and blue lights flashed across the gray sky. 2 officers stepped out. One of them, the same man from the last incident. He asked Mr. Walker, "Are they back again?" I nodded. "And this time I want a formal report." Ethan shouted, "Dad, you are destroying my life," I answered. "No, you did." The officer turned to Ethan. "Sir, if you don't leave this property immediately, you will be charged with trespassing and harassment." Madison screamed at the officer, "You have no right." He raised his hand. "Ma'am, step back. There have been 3 community reports about you in the last 2 weeks. This is your last warning." Madison pointed at me, shaking with rage. "You're a monster," I said softly. "I'm just an old man who's had enough." The officers escorted them back to the SUV. Ethan turned around 3 times, eyes wild, not with anger now, but with fear of losing the money he once considered guaranteed. Before getting in the car, Madison spat the final line. "You'll die alone," I replied. "I'd rather die alone than live in a house with people who see me as a bank." The SUV door slammed. They drove away, a streak of white disappearing into the cold afternoon. The officer turned to me. "Do you want them banned from approaching your home?" I looked at the pine trees, their needles shaking gently in the early winter wind, and I nodded. "From today on, they are not welcome here." He wrote it in his report. At the homeowner's request, Ethan Walker and Madison Walker are prohibited from approaching within 200 feet of the property. One simple line. But it ended 3 years of exploitation. As the officers left, the sky opened and a soft dusting of snow began to fall. I stood alone on my porch, but for the first time in years, I did not feel lonely. I felt free. And sometimes freedom is the only gift a 71-year-old man can give himself after surviving what should have broken him. November 12, 2025. Denver woke under a thin sheet of winter sunlight, that pale, almost rice paper glow that touches the window frame gently as if to say, the old chapter is closing now. A quieter one begins. I made my morning coffee. That familiar bitterness filled the kitchen, the way it always had, a ritual belonging to a man who spent half his life in silence. When I stepped onto the porch, my mailbox was full. But today, those envelopes didn't carry fear. They carried closure. Linda, the neighbor who had stood by me more than my own family, walked across the street holding a large cream envelope. "Henry," she said softly, "HOA asked me to bring this. They just finished the vote." I opened it. The red seal of the Pine Ridge Community Association sat at the top. The letter was blunt. Following the meeting on November 11, 2025, the board unanimously votes that Ethan Walker and Madison Walker must vacate the Pine Ridge community before November 30, 2025, due to harassment rule violations and threats toward neighbors. I read each word. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. I only felt lighter, as if someone finally lifted the bag of stones I'd been carrying for 3 long years. Linda placed a hand over mine. "Henry, you didn't do anything wrong. People just finally saw the truth." I nodded, folded the letter slowly, neatly, the way USPS trained me decades ago. Inside the mailbox, another envelope waited. This one was from the IRS. Larger, heavier, full of carbon copies. I opened it. The headline struck hard. Notice of deficiency, amount owed, $42, $800 penalties and interest included. And underneath, improper income filing using SSN 4921, not belonging to the filer. I exhaled. So quietly the breath seemed to fade straight into the cold air. I didn't feel satisfaction that Ethan would finally face consequences. I simply felt the weight leaving me. Then I read the most important line: primary victim Henry Walker is cleared. No liability assigned. For 3 years I'd woken up afraid of federal envelopes. On the morning of November 12, 2025, that fear finally let me go. But not everything that broke between me, Ethan, and Madison should fall on the children. Late afternoon there was a knock on my door. It was Ms. Jensen, Noah's teacher, carrying a stack of counseling forms. "Mr. Walker," she said gently, "the school is enrolling Noah and Sophie in a 12-week support program. They'll be working with specialists." I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you," I said. "What happened?" "Isn't their fault." She nodded. "Noah said he misses you." I had not felt my heart stir in months, but those words did it. For the first time in a long time, someone missed me for who I was, not for the $800 I gave every Friday. And then, the envelope that changed everything. At the bottom of the mailbox was a plain white envelope, no logo, no stamp except my name, written in soft, slanted handwriting, to Mr. Henry Walker. I opened it. Inside was a simple letter on cheap notebook paper, but every word was written with care. "Dear Mr. Walker, my name is Maria Alvarez, a first-year education major. I am the first recipient of the Laura Thompson Scholarship. There is no way to thank you enough. My family never believed college was possible for me. I read the story about your wife, Mrs. Laura. I want you to know I will try to become a teacher like her, someone who brings light into other people's lives. Thank you for saving my dream. God bless you. Maria." I sat on the porch bench. The letter trembled softly in my hand, not from the wind, but from something I thought I had lost, the gentle reminder that a person's worth is not defined by who abandoned them, but by what they still choose to give to this world. For the first time in months, my eyes stung. Not because of Ethan, but because of Laura. I drove to Greenwood Cemetery that same afternoon. The sky was a muted gray, winter's quiet breath drifting over the trees. I carried Maria's letter in my jacket pocket. When I reached Laura's stone, the first snowflakes of the season were falling, glittering softly in the fading light. I placed my hand on the cold marble, let the chill seep through my skin, and I said I found myself again. I placed Maria's letter on the stone, weighed it down with a small pebble so the wind wouldn't take it. I spoke again, soft but certain. "After all the nights I thought I lost you, lost Ethan, lost our family, I finally learned the only thing I ever needed to find was me." A breeze passed through. A single golden leaf drifted down beside my shoe. I stood there a long time. Not in grief, not in anger, but in peace. A kind of peace I thought I no longer deserved. When I returned to my truck, my phone buzzed. An email. From the Scholarship Foundation. Subject line: "Congratulations, Mr. Walker." I opened it. "You have been listed as the founding benefactor of the Laura Thompson Scholarship Fund." I smiled. Not a triumphant smile. Not a victorious smile, but the quiet smile of a man who finally came home to himself after years of being treated like a walking bank account, after years of humiliation, after years of being forgotten. A man who reclaimed his dignity, a husband, a retired teacher, a man who once loved, once sacrificed, once was betrayed, and finally learned to forgive himself. Before you go, if this story touched something in you, please Like this video to help the story reach more people. Comment the city or country you're watching from. Share it with someone who needs this today. And subscribe for more stories like this. Stories of courage, of quiet strength, and of the kind of justice life sometimes gives too late, but always right on time. Thank you for listening to my journey. I'll see you in the next story.